The courtroom and the campaign colliding today. Lawyers presented their closing arguments in the Trump criminal trial, while supporters of President Biden were right outside the court. Our Robert Costa joins us now from outside the courthouse. Robert, it's great to see you. Of course, Donald Trump has been spending a significant amount of time inside the courthouse, and I wonder how it's impacting his presidential campaign.
Well, it's evident, Weija, that his campaign is here in Lower Manhattan. It was earlier today that I was speaking to several of his top advisors, Jason Miller, Stephen Chung, among others. They are all here, along with members of the Trump family. They see this as a real political moment for them to try to get their bearings ahead of the first debate, ahead of the convention, and to reassure Republicans nationwide that while he is facing a criminal trial, he's still running for the White House. And he showcased throughout this trial his solidarity with so many Republicans, including the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who was here just steps away weeks ago.
And today, Robert, we also saw the Biden campaign making a rare appearance outside the courthouse, which certainly felt a little off-brand. It had a lot of Hollywood star power. And you spoke with actor Robert De Niro. What did you ask him?
I did. I had a chance to speak with the Academy Award winner, who was also President Biden, just did the voiceover for a recent Biden campaign advertisement. And I said to Mr. De Niro, do you believe you're going to break through with this appearance here with everyday voters who might not pay attention to this trial or to politics or the latest headlines? And he said, well, he hopes he does. He doesn't have some kind of overwhelming confidence that he believes one appearance here is going to change the stakes of the campaign. But he did say that he's trying to bring the issue of democracy to the fore. He really believes, and this echoes the Biden campaign's message, that former President Trump is a threat to American democracy, has authoritarian, even dictator-like persona, policies, ideology. And De Niro underscored that with his remarks today, standing alongside the spokesperson for the Biden campaign, along with other Biden surrogates. And it sent a message that the Biden campaign was coming here. And I asked the Biden campaign spokesman, Michael Tyler, why are you here? And he said, because you are here, meaning the media. The media is covering this trial. The Biden campaign believes it's in the mix when it comes to the battleground states, but it wants to be in the mix against the presumptive Republican nominee by showing up on this terrain.
And it has become a hot spot on the campaign trail. I wonder how Trump's team responded to this latest move by the Biden team.
They had a press conference right after the Biden press conference. There was almost a surreal American political and entertainment moment. You had Robert De Niro walking away with bodyguards and officials while the Trump campaign came up to the microphones and mocked his movie career in Lower Manhattan near De Niro's home, while the former president sat in the criminal courthouse behind me across the street. Something you rarely see on the presidential campaign trail, but it's really a microcosm of what this trial is all about. It's a legal battle that's unfolding right now with the closing arguments, but there is a broader political battle that is playing out. And this is really laying the groundwork for a summer campaign where you see the Biden campaign already ready to shine a spotlight on former President Trump's conduct and their belief that he is a threat to American democracy. And you see the Trump campaign, meanwhile, mocking the Biden campaign time and time again.
Robert, it's always great to have your reporting, and today certainly did feel like a made-for-TV moment. It was very real, and we appreciate you covering it for us. Joel Payne and Matt Gorman join us now. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist. Matt is a Republican strategist who served as a senior advisor to Senator Tim Scott's presidential campaign. Thank you both for being here. So, Matt, I want to start with you because the former president has said no matter what happens, no matter what the verdict is, he doesn't think it's going to impact his campaign. Is he right?
The polls show he is. I mean, I think we're right now so baked in. There's an NBC News poll out last month, about 42%. So they would vote for him one way, 40% another way. So really, I think in large part, this verdict won't really have much of an effect one way or another. There will be other issues at play in the campaign, but this is just something that I think will reinforce one way or another in voters' minds.
And Joel, do you agree with that? Because, you know, he could be convicted and he still says no big deal.
I think he is thinking about that from a primary mindset, right? If we're still in the Republican primary, I think Matt's probably right. I think that Republican primary voters have made it very clear that Donald Trump's criminality, or maybe lack thereof or whatever, doesn't really factor into their vote. I do think when you're talking about a general election, a really close election where 10,000, 20,000 votes moving could make the difference. I do think that in an event like this, where maybe you have a former president that's being convicted of a crime, a felony, would impact his status in the polls. But it also depends on how it's narrated. And I think, getting to the narration part, you talked about Robert De Niro. I heard your conversation with Bob there. It reminds me, in 2016, I worked for the Hillary Clinton campaign. We had an ad where we had Morgan Freeman narrated, right? And campaigns do this type of stuff all the time. And you do that because you want to draw attention to something. You want people to start to think about it. That's why you put an A-list Hollywood celebrity in the middle of Manhattan on a hot, almost summer day, is because you want people to pay attention to it. And I think that's what the Biden campaign wanted to do. And also Bob's point about what Michael Tyler said, that you're here because I'm here, because I, the media, am here. I think the Biden campaign is trying to make an implicit point that this is what the media is covering, and somewhat submission to the 24/7 cycle that we're in this cycle at this moment.
But Matt, they also have to admit that they are now following the Trump campaign and meeting the former president where he is in order to get their message across, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the cameras are there, the media is there, the spectacle, you're covering it, right? Would it be easier if they had done it in Washington? I mean, logistically, maybe, but that's not where the media circus is. I think this was the first in a long time, kind of the first act we've seen with the Biden campaign, in a way, kind of tacitly admitting that they don't have the momentum at the moment. It was a little bit of a scrappier move, a little bit of an underdog move. I think for a large part of this campaign, the Biden campaign has been running it as if they're ahead. And I think, look, most polls show, at least for today, Trump would have an advantage over Biden. So I think this move is a little bit scrappier. It showed they're willing to go out of the box a little bit in a way we haven't seen before.
We're in basketball season. If this is a basketball game coming out of halftime, Biden campaign probably thinks they're down 5 or 10 points. They have to do something to change strategy. I think Matt's point's a good one there.
Well, and also to your point that, this trial itself might not be one of the deciding issues they're trying to make, they being the Biden campaign, January 6th, an issue. And we did hear from not only De Niro, but also former Capitol Hill police officers. I'm going to take a listen to one of them.
Donald Trump is the greatest threat to our democracy and the safety of communities across the country today. He has encouraged and continued to encourage political violence.
When I went to Arizona and spoke with undecided voters and I asked them if democracy is on the ballot, they said that's just a talking point. Is this issue on the ballot, Joel?
Well, I think depending on where you are, right? I think in certain places it's going to resonate more. I think the president and his team, President Biden's team, think it is something that's on the minds of voters in a place like Arizona, maybe in a place like Georgia. It might not be that way everywhere across the map, but it is going to be something that is going to resonate with your base. And I'd say one of the things that the Biden campaign, again, to the point that Matt was making, has not done as good of a job as the Trump campaign is consolidating their base. And so talking about democracy, along with other issues like abortion, is going to do that base consolidation that I do think that the president and his team are acknowledging they need to catch up and do a little bit better job of.
I think it was worth pointing out, too, Harry Dunn recently ran for Congress in Maryland. I believe it was an Annapolis seat, was endorsed by a lot of the Democratic leadership, including Pelosi and others, got a lot of money behind him. It didn't work. He ran on those similar talking points. Who did win? Someone who talked a little bit more about abortion and that sort of issue. It was a deep blue seat, but to your point, those two issues unite the primary vote a lot more than the general election vote.
And also, I want to ask you, Matt, because Senator Tim Scott spoke over the weekend. He was asked about Trump's false claim that FBI agents were locked and loaded during the Mar-a-Lago search, because, of course, that is another case that we are following. I want to hear what Senator Scott had to say and ask you about it on the other side.
I haven't found myself agreeing with Attorney General Garland on any issue. I will say I saw the video of the SWAT team from the FBI raiding Mar-a-Lago. I have not seen the same video of them raiding Joe Biden's garage. So I'd love to have that comparison. But more importantly, once again, we find ourselves reinforcing this two-tiered justice system.
What do you make of his decision not to fully condemn that rhetoric that we heard from Trump?
I mean, look, he has said a lot of that throughout the course of his campaign. It's really no different. And I think, Joel and I were talking a little bit too. I think over the last 10 years, I think if Democrats kind of making a lot of hay about what kind of Trump says on one thing or another, it's a lot of it so much is baked in. We've had 4 years of President Trump. What is new, for instance? Abortion. That is something that they've seen electoral success on in recent years. But I think I would caution Democrats. Look, I worked for Jeb Bush. I wrote a lot of the talking points Hillary ended up using in 2016 initially when I was in the primary. By saying, Donald Trump says this, can you believe what he said now? He's not the nicest guy. It's baked in a lot of respects. And I think even in some respects, people will say, yeah, that might all be true, but I want to be able to afford a home, buy cheaper groceries and the like. So what are some things that haven't worked or for Republicans recently? Talking about abortion and the like, that might be more fruitful for Democrats.
Well, I know he's your former boss, but I have to ask you whether he's in the mix for VP or not.
I mean, I read what you guys read. I mean, I work for him. I wanted his name at the top of the ticket, but I'll settle for the second line too.
But is he?
I have no knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah,
I told Matt he should maybe start measuring some drapes, maybe some executive office buildings, maybe.
You never know.
Yeah.
Joel, I want to ask you about what's happening in Ohio, because the Biden-Harris campaign, they're already taking steps to make sure that the president will be on the ballot. What do you make of that?
Well, it looks like the DNC is going to virtually nominate President Biden to make it ahead of this Ohio ballot deadline. One, obviously, they want to signal to Ohio Democrats that President Biden's going to be there and he's going to be competitive. By the way, abortion is an issue that's in the air in Ohio. So while is it realistic to think that Democrats could turn Ohio back blue this cycle? It's probably a stretch, but you certainly want to make Republicans defend that territory. And so it's important for Democrats to signal to their base and to their supporters that they're all in there. And I think that a part of what we're seeing is just the president and his team trying to give that affirmation to his folks.
Competitive Senate race, too. They need Biden on the ballot to help Sherrod Brown have a chance at winning.
Yeah.
Yes, an excellent point. And I wish I could talk to you all afternoon, but I'm sorry we have to leave it there. Joel Payne and Matt Gorman, thanks for your time.